Ready? Okay, I was going to ask, can you hear me? But yes, you can. Well, hello, beautiful people, and welcome to this ESG and sustainability track, which Betsson is hosting together with Next.io. Thank you, Next, for the opportunity. Yes. I need to do something. Yes. So, my name is Jonna Donlund, and I'm head of sustainability at Betsson Group. I've been a Betssonite for about 7 years, and I have 25 years of experience in corporate communications. So I've been with the Swedish government, European Parliament, the UN, Saab, which is a defense company that makes stuff like fighter jets, and now I'm here at Betsson Group. And this career journey has taken me all around the world, all the way to beautiful Malta. I'm a dog lover, a bookworm, and let's face it, a little bit of a chocolate addict. There's some chocolate for you guys as well at the back of the room. This here is my dog Dante. If you ever need any kind of favor, you just say something nice about my dog, and I will be all yours. Now, obviously, today we are here to talk about sustainability and ESG, as it's also called. So environmental, social, and governance. Not exactly a topic which is without controversy, but also a topic with great potential. And what we're here to talk about today is how a focus on sustainability can really benefit the gaming sector. So another way to cut the cake is to talk about the 3 Ps: people, planet, profit. We have a great agenda today where we will dive into exactly that. So without further ado, I've always wanted to say that, I give you Russell Mifsud, our keynote speaker, who will talk to us about steering the future, ESG, in the online gaming gambling sphere. Ecosystem. Yeah. Take it away, Russell.
Thank you so much. Can I get a clicker? Do you have the clicker?
Clicker.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. It's an absolute pleasure to be here with you all today and to be talking about a topic that I've become increasingly more passionate about. Let's see how I can get this to work. Where am I pointing? Great. Okay, so thank you, Jonna, and thank you to Betsson then for organizing this. It's a topic that I believe is going to become a lot more mainstream, and I need it to become a lot more front of mind. Essentially, when we're looking at ESG, if we look at this quote, companies that improve their environmental, social, and corporate governance do not just do good, they do well. That was Larry Fink, then of BlackRock CEO. The first thing that kind of attracted me to ESG was the call to action when we started looking at climate change and the biodiversity impact. That's what initially kind of compelled me to it. I'm a big fan of David Attenborough. And as I started looking into it, I became quite intrigued with the concept of profitable sustainability, the aspect of being able to still do good for the planet and society, but also have a thriving, profitable business. Then as I began to look into it even more, I began to think that this ESG can present a wonderful opportunity for the gambling sphere. And the reason is, I mean, if we're frank, the gambling sphere's reputation, from an outside perspective at least, isn't particularly good. And the gambling sphere is in a bit of a vicious circle, because what you've got is you've got regulatory pressures, or you've got media that may be skewed, or certain research where there may be certain results already in play, and they need to be scoring a methodology. That adds then to the regulatory or the political public pressure, which feeds into regulatory measures. That's cast down then to licensees, where margins become squeezed. It becomes tougher then for operators then to operate, squeeze out certain operators from the market. Black market is growing. Regulators can often do very little when it comes down to the black market, so they normally take it out then on the regulated market. So it's a bit of a vicious cycle. So my hope is, if we can start looking at ESG from more of a collective approach, that might help draw a line in the sand between the white and the rogue, the sustainable and the unsustainable, to help change and shift the narrative that I think the industry is so desperately in need of. So my goal today is to talk you through very quickly about what ESG is, want to be going into provide a little bit of a snapshot as to where ESG sits within the gambling sphere, some of the good points that it presents, the opportunities for the industry, as well as some of the challenges. To be fair, ESG is not a switch. And then we'll start delving into those direct benefits alongside the ecosystem in which the industry operates within. And I think it's really important to be looking at it from various points. So, if we look at what ESG essentially is, it's an evaluation of a firm's collective consciousness, and it has a wide range of scoring criteria and non-financial performance indicators, all right? And those measures essentially measure the sustainability of a business, and secondly, the impact of a business's product and services on that of planet and society. So the first point to note is that no business operates in a vacuum. Every input, every effort generates a list of risks and rewards. And so that's why we start to look at the columns of E, S, and G, essentially, because it becomes easier to be able to identify, monitor, and manage each of these points. What I'm realizing as I'm talking is that the slide doesn't look to be complete, but never mind over him. So a very quick overview is when we look at the E side of things, that's a comprehensive evaluation of the actual and potential environmental impacts, the risks, the opportunities that presents then to the world, climate change, carbon emissions, waste. These are some of the components that fall within environment. From a social standpoint, this concerns managing the relationships with the stakeholders. And of course, here we start to look at elements of HR, diversity, etc. So it's employee well-being, community relations, product impact and consumer well-being. This is where we start to see the underlying aspect of RG. Data privacy, of course, is another key area which will likely grow over the coming years. And G is the governance side of things. G concerns then the internal practices governing a firm's conduct to ensure both transparency and accountability. These are two terms that we're going to hear a lot more of as time starts to roll on. And they cover areas like bribery and corruption, executive compensation, board structure, tax compliance, etc. So grouping them, once again, allows a company to be able to better understand, measure, and monitor. Now, this slide actually provides a bit of a snapshot as to where the gambling sphere sits, at least in terms of common priorities. We carried out a materiality assessment of the industry to try and understand. Of course, governance is not blank. There are a great deal of considerations then over there. The reality is when we're looking at the E side of things for online gambling anyway, it's less of a key focus, okay? Unless you are brick and mortar, you have a retail element. The same goes for if you are brick and mortar, then smoking, for instance, in casinos is a key aspect from a social standpoint. It's not to say that there aren't any environmental considerations for the online sphere. That particularly kind of falls within the scope 3 side of things when you come down to measuring your data centers' efforts and impacts then on the value chain. Typically what we look at least from what I've seen, RG, diversity, and carbon footprint are the three most common areas that operators and suppliers tend to be reporting on. The reason for that is that they're typically the easiest factors to be measuring. So there's a data component, right, over here. How easy is it then to be measuring and then reporting each of these aspects? But there are a range of other areas that fall within ESG, such as R&D, innovation, social and economic contribution, cybersecurity, which is a key thing, of course, that we've seen recently now out in the States, talent, etc. So data, once again, is a key component here, and it comes from collective contribution. This is one of the good things that the MGA has done by building up their voluntary code of good practice that can start to serve as a bit of a benchmark, a guiding star as to where things are. Where it comes down to the expectation or the understanding of ESG within the gambling sphere, there's quite a varying spectrum of perspectives. On one hand, there are certain businesses that are heavily investing to become more sustainable and resilient businesses, like Betson. There are a great deal more that are doing it, but they don't necessarily recognize that they are doing it because they're not capturing it, they're not measuring it, they're not articulating it. So when you start having these conversations with companies, they'll be saying, oh, no, we're not doing anything on ESG. And as soon as you start to press them, you say, oh, actually, yeah, we do that, we do that, we do that. And I think this is a key component then on the spectrum we need to be having conversations with all together. Another group tend to politicize ESG. In fact, if we go back to the earlier earlier quote stemming from BlackRock. Larry no longer uses that quote because it's found that the left side tend to politicize it whilst the far right weaponize it. Some see it as a checkbox exercise. Okay, I'll just do that with the limited value of strategic benefit. And then there's a group that basically start to see ESG skeptically. They see, given the regulatory headwinds, the way in which the industry's seen, the sin stocks elements, there's a bit of an attitude of why bother. And it really frustrates me when we see this, particularly then from CEOs, because it's found that the most sustainable businesses are living and breathing ESG from within the CEO, and the CEO is passing all of that information down. So let's be clear, ESG agenda is becoming increasingly more front of mind, whether it's at board level then as well, C-level, whether you're looking at investors. Investors is a key component, which we'll delve into soon, and consumers. Consumers, why? Because you've got varying perspectives. The DNA make up the expectation of consumers and people is evolving. So, here we go. We won't delve into each of these points, just in the interest of time. But if anyone's interested in having the set of slides afterwards, please let me know. I'm happy to talk you through the things in more depth. So why is ESG an opportunity? Once again, we won't go into each and every aspect, but the first thing is, if we look at the first box, it's risk identification management. That falls under the corporate governance side of things. Having that strong component allows you to have a front seat to better anticipate regulatory change. And we know that the industry is very good at being very fluid and changing the ballpark figure. So it allows you to maintain your high standards. That reduces the chance of having fines, legal issues. It also increases regulatory trust, which is an important thing, because if you are called up and you're having to have a debate then with the regulator, having that trust is a key component and could make a difference of millions. It certainly builds up loyalty, and loyalty can be taken from two perspectives, both in terms of the consumers and in terms of employees. And I think one of the companies that do this really well is Patagonia. Patagonia is one of the US outdoor clothes and gear companies out in the US. They had initially pledged 1% of their revenue or 10% of profits to environmental causes. And that helped build up a huge amount of loyalty amongst their consumer base. And I think it's important to know that Patagonia didn't just shoot from the hip and say, okay, we're going to go in for environment. They knew that their target audience loved the environment. So this rang true for their common principles. So I think this is important when we start looking at social contribution and charitable initiatives. Don't just shoot it out there for the sake of it. It has to be aligned to that of your strategy. The other thing that they do really well, because of their approach, I think they've raised about 100 million towards environmental causes. From an employee standpoint, that's translated into far stickier employees, where the turnover rate is about 5 times less that of the average turnover in the US. And of course, that has a direct impact, right, on bottom line when it comes down to training and being able to recruit new people. Operational costs go down, largely down to innovation, having more sustainable uses. Access to capital, that's an interesting one. Once again, we'll be delving into it soon, but an important thing to note is when you look at the investor landscape, there are investors that invest and are committed to the gambling sphere, and there are a good deal that don't touch it. But then there are many more that are kind of on the fence, and they don't know whether they want to be going into the gambling sphere, but we need to give them a good reason as to why they go into the gambling sphere. And that's by being able to articulate the good things that the industry is doing. Shareholder engagement. PR, so let's be clear, at the moment there is a PR slant. Right now there's very much a carrot involved then for ESG before the stick starts to come into play. So if you look at things even from an advertising restrictions, advertising bans, think about it. Think less about trying to advertise a bonus or having a celebrity endorsement. Look at it then from the perspective of being able then to shout out about the good that you're going to do and how you're going to be more front of mind then with your customers, and once again, the employees and that ecosystem that we're going to be looking at then very soon. It's not easy, right? So I think it's important to note that there are different degrees of investment when it comes down to ESG. You don't need to be all in. Okay, all in does take up a phenomenal amount of time, and the important thing is that ESG is a journey. It's a journey for absolutely everyone, including ourselves then as KPMG, where we're on a journey and we're learning as we're going. But it's important then to be able to define clear goals and metrics. Sometimes being able to acquire or recognize those metrics or those metrics that are material to your business, that takes time, okay? There's a lack of standardization, as we were saying before, and identifying the relevant metrics is also an exercise in itself, particularly if you start looking at metrics from the value chain. Integrating this into the corporate strategy, that can sometimes be a challenge, particularly if you're trying to take a very sustainable route with a long-term vision and you're having a discussion with your commercial team saying, what do you mean? We need to do this. We can't take this hit right now. That's why ESG needs to be lived and breathed in order to see the long-term impact and the benefit. You need to have alignment then with the business objectives. Data collection and management, you need to be able to build up that infrastructure, okay? That's why, once again, there are the varying degrees of investment. You can start off small and start to pledge to one thing and start to grow. Once again, from an MGA standpoint, that's why the voluntary code of good practice has got two different levels. One which is easier than the other, one which is more geared up towards advanced companies that have been doing it for a long time. And there is, of course, the cost of commitment. You can't develop an ESG strategy and be vocal about it 1 year and then change it. You can't change the ballpark from 1 year to the next. You need to be transparent. It needs to be ongoing. So there needs to be that tracking and reporting and overall commitment. So once again, it needs to be embedded in the strategy. It's not a switch. When we start looking at the ecosystem, so this is the way, these are the different stakeholders, or at least some of the main stakeholders that a company would typically be experiencing or engaging with within the gambling sphere. So we know that in 2024, there are 50,000 companies, if we look at the regulatory side of things in the first instance, 50,000 companies, excluding that of their value chains, that are going to fall within scope for CSRD. Okay? We know that there's going to be more increased stringent scrutiny, heightened reporting requirements. There's going to be a particular focus on social responsibility. This is why, once again, the narrative that the gambling sphere needs to be telling needs to be navigating things differently. Data protection's likely to become a key focus, as well as cybersecurity. Once again, there's a carrot at the moment, okay? We need to be, the powers that may be are watching and learning. So there needs to be an element of self-regulation. An example that I like to go back to is the industry hasn't been super good at self-regulation. The industry is very good at making hay when the sun is shining. So an example is the FOBTs, for instance, in the UK with the £100 spin. There was no effort then to specifically be reducing that to £20 or £10. And what happened? Regulators then eventually came in and reduced it then to 1. So there needs to be that self-regulation. There needs to be that guiding star. Suppliers is a key component over here. So we know that there are already groups that are going up and approaching their value chain, the suppliers, and asking them then to come back with certain metrics to be able to feed into the company's overall standing and their scope 3. Typically what I see is a lot of groups come up and they say, oh no, but we're small. We're not going to fall within scope. We don't need to bother with ESG. And the struggle is that you are going to be, even if you fall out of scope of reporting requirements today or the immediate future, there's going to be a commercial pressure over here. So McDonald's, for instance, right? They're going off to all of their suppliers and saying, guys, you need to be reporting, big or large, okay, big or small, and they're going back and they're saying, guys, you need to hit this particular threshold by this date. Can you do it? If you can't do it, we're very sorry, but we're going to have to drop you as a supplier because there's going to be an impact. You're going to be guilty by association, right? So there's going to be that commercial benefit for even smaller groups, and commercial viability as well, if you look at it then, to have a competitive advantage if you're going in with a strong ESG commitment. Even if you look at companies like Hard Rock, they've got a code of conduct that they expect then of their suppliers. If you can't fulfill that commitment, you're not going to fall within scope of their procurement. Partners, I used to be an affiliate back in 2009, and one of the things that I used to have 150 relationships with UK-based bookies. And the process to become an affiliate for each of these bookies was really easy. And the reality is, today, the sheer complexities then of compliance have been riddled the industry, but the process of becoming an affiliate is still largely the same. So even when you start looking at the DD process, the governance aspect, there are going to be different questions that are going to be coming out then for that of partners. You need to be coming out and taking more of an approach then and understanding who your partners are. So once again, if you've got an ESG angle, a slant, that's going to work in your favor. From a customer standpoint, over here, we had done a very quick study on US and UK gamblers, and we found that if we focus on a couple of the points, 49% of consumers factor ESG into deciding where to place their bets, but equally so, 60%, there should be percentage over there, of gaming customers know little or nothing about how gaming companies have implemented ESG. Now, you'd imagine that as this starts to become more mainstream and front of mind, that increase, 49%, is going to grow significantly. If we look at things from an employee standpoint, so there are two aspects here. Look at when there was the IPO boom, gaming companies around 2015. There was a lot of recruitment from people who were outside that of the industry. Bankers, for instance, who had been through this process. Now, if the industry's got a bad rep, then that's going to deter a potential banker, for instance, or whoever it may be, to relocate to another jurisdiction with all their family to be working with a company that they don't consider to be reputable. So telling that story, showcasing that there's more of a net positive impact on society is one extra reason why you can be bringing in then the right sort of employees. We had done this study then locally in Malta. 21% of employees have considered leaving their current job to work in another organization with better ESG performance. Once again, same as before, 26% of employees have relatively lower awareness of ESG initiatives. So the industry needs to start to become, by the way, this wasn't just geared up then for the gambling sphere, it was across various industries in Malta. But the industries need to become better at articulating what they're doing, and this figure, 21%, is going to grow. If we look at the other column, just over there, 66% of employees and job seekers would prefer a job at a company that has moderately better ESG performance, even if the other company pays 5% more. Now, this is a low amount, but the industry is pretty good then at having people leave one organization to move to another for a small increment. Now, that figure, that 66%, does drop to 37% when you look at a 14%, but if you look at the salary, that's still basic needs. What happens when you're looking at six-figure salaries, and you're looking at people who are more self-actualization, self-fulfillment, that percentage of increase is going to have to be far higher to have a movement. So you're going to have an audience and employees that are going to be far stickier if you can articulate the good work that you're doing. Think of the Patagonia example. This one wasn't a study that we had done at KPMG, but it covers McKinsey and Company. I think very quickly they had done this is a focus on representation. So here we look at diversity and we look at ethnicity, representation. And it was found that companies that had 30% plus female representation in senior positions outperformed the bottom quartile by 39%. And this is growing, right? The same goes for ethnicity, where we're looking at 27% improvement when you compare then the upper versus that of the lower. Capital markets, we had said that investors are starting to become more vocal about their requirements, what they're expecting to have. ESG due diligences are also on the rise. There is going to be that expectations, so that's going to have a direct impact on your share price, or the valuation of your business. If you're raising debt for ESG-related initiatives, we typically find that this is a KPMG piece, 2 to 5 reduction in basis points when it comes down to borrowing. If you look at the top point over there from an M&A perspective, 14% higher EBIT multiple when it comes down then to selling the business as a result of being more sustainable. This one just showcases the risks and the impacts that these risks, carbon emissions, corporate governance, corruption, etc., the impact that these may have on the share price. Now, unfortunately, it only goes up until 2019, but you can tell it's telling a story of growth over here. So it's going to become more and more impactful. The last stakeholder is media. We won't go through each of these points, but I think the most important one is this one at the bottom. Study finds 4% of suicides in Victoria are gambling-related, but the number may be much higher. Now, that's such a dangerous statement. In my view, wildly untrue and unfounded. But it doesn't matter what I think. It matters what the stakeholders think. So this is going to feed back into the vicious cycle that we're looking at. There are going to be political pressure, there's going to be regulatory pressure, they're not going to be able to capture the black market, they're going to apply that pressure onto the regulated entities. This is why now we need to be going and starting to change the story. So essentially, the way in which I see it is ESG, we're essentially at a pivotal crossroad in the industry. I don't know how we're going to be able to combat the black market sustainably. And the choices that we make today with our businesses are not only going to define our businesses tomorrow, but they're also going to determine the sustainability of the gambling industry at large. So I believe we have a unique opportunity, maybe even a profound responsibility, to lead with purpose and innovate with integrity and operate with transparency through collective contribution, to come together, to start to change that narrative and turn this industry into one that is more greatly respected and admired to the degree that it deserves.
You want him to stay?